Well, good morning, and a pleasant good Monday morning to each and every one of you. Here we are on the week of Thanksgiving. It's a wonderful holiday in many, many respects because really, if you get down to the core of it, it's what we're thankful for. And I think that's what makes it one of the nicest, not number one, not number two, but we really do, no matter what situation we're in, we have a lot to be thankful for. So, an early happy Thanksgiving to all of you. And we welcome you, as always, to Dialed In. I'm Tom Brenneman, joined by Luke Brenneman, fresh off the loss of his Indiana Hoosiers against Ohio State. Lukey, good morning. Have you recovered?
Absolutely. I've totally recovered. We have a lot to talk about that game. We have a lot of college football to talk about today.
Yeah.
And the Bengals are back this week. So a lot going on at the same time, but we should definitely get into that one quick.
And Casey, you've already had an early start, Casey McAllister, our producer and contributor extraordinaire, to your Thanksgiving holiday week in your case, correct?
That's right. I enjoyed my side of the family's Thanksgiving. Had in-laws, or not in-laws, I'm sorry. I had cousins and aunts and uncles come in from outside of town. Enjoyed them. And then I had my own Friendsgiving. I had a bunch of my friends and buddies come over and put together a nice little Friendsgiving. Got to see my friend's newborn for the first time, and that was special. So
Was
yeah.
Thomas there? Tomas there?
Yeah, and speaking of Tomas, he proposed to his now fiance, and they are engaged now. So congrats to Thomas and Megan.
Congratulations to Thomas indeed. He's a good man. We had a great time at your quote unquote bachelor party, if you will, which you badmouthed him for. Need I remind many of our new viewers for those that weren't around, Luke, you weren't around. There was a time when we had a nice little bachelor party that Casey's best man, Thomas, put together for him. We all ended up down at the Banks. And 3 days later, Casey badmouthed the guy, said it wasn't a good bachelor party.
I said it was an 8 out of 10. Said it was an 8 out of 10, and it wasn't perfect.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Our show is presented by UDF and Encore Technologies. We thank them for their support. We come your way twice a week, live here on Mondays at 9 o'clock on Chatterbox, and we'll post later in the day on the Believe Network. Our second day of the week is Thursday. No show this Thursday, Thanksgiving. So we'll let that fly. We'll miss a week of picks here this week, although we can probably update you since Luke will want to brag about how well he's doing, and I give him credit for how well he is doing. You can find us on YouTube, the Chatterbox Sports page. Download us anytime. Just search Dialed In with Tom Brenneman, and you're dialed in. All right, here we go. Luke mentioned it. Bengals back at it today down at Paycor in preparation of Sunday's division game against Pittsburgh. Nobody around here, okay, we've done this drill now for 10 weeks, 11 weeks. Nobody around here, at least not on Dialed In, is making any more of this matchup than what it is, or any other Bengals game for that matter, the rest of this season until proven otherwise. The belief is gone in this team. There's no more emotion, good or bad. Go win, prove us wrong. Otherwise, continue to flounder along and continue living off really 2 good seasons in the last 30 years. The Steelers are coming off a loss in snowy Cleveland. Baltimore was off on the weekend, but will play tonight against the Chargers. Saquon Barkley, a monster Sunday night, career best 255 yards in a rout of the Rams. The Eagles, now there's a team to believe in. They've won 7 in a row. We'll bounce around the NFL here shortly. The college game continues to be downright amazing and perplexing. Ohio State manhandled Indiana in Columbus. Buckeyes are 2-1 against top 5 teams this year. And Michigan is next on Saturday at the Horseshoe. Will the Hoosiers get in the college football playoff? Well, they're certainly helped by the 2 lost teams, especially in the SEC, that became 3 lost teams over the weekend. Alabama was, I have never seen Alabama get absolutely drilled like they got drilled by a 500 team at Oklahoma. Now, it's Oklahoma. They have good players. But I listened to that game for almost the entire game on the radio driving from Clemson to Charlotte. They ran the ball like 45, 50 times, Oklahoma did. And they just smashed Oklahoma. That would have never happened with Saban there. Would never have happened. Not to say they didn't lose games. And they got humiliated when Ohio State ran it down their throat back in the Ezekiel Elliott days. But that was the last time Alabama had it run down their throat like that. Ole Miss, we've said on this show, overrated all year long. They lose to Florida. And A&M loses in triple overtime to Auburn. We'll break it all down. Lastly, the Reds traded Jonathan India. Is that a good move or a bad move? All right, Luke, where to start? I assume we're going to start with the Bengalis. You made the point right before we went on the air. It's hard to believe they're favored in this game. But I say that, but maybe it's not. The Steelers, after all, just lost on the road to the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, you're muted, Luke.
Sorry, I was muted. I think the better way to look at it now that I think I've let it settle in this morning is realistically, the Bengals are never really going to find themselves as more of a 3.5, 4-point underdog in a divisional game. Then they're at home, an extended week of rest, and then the Steelers are coming off the worst loss maybe of the entire NFL season from any, top tier team. After the Steelers came off that Baltimore win, people are saying, hey, why aren't we talking about Pittsburgh as the top team in the NFL? Obviously, I think the Lions have taken that and ran away with it the past couple weeks. But the Steelers got a huge win at home against Baltimore and the ultimate quick, early Thursday night football letdown spot in a blizzard in Cleveland. So they don't have too much going for them outside of the fact that they're, 5 games over 500 right now, and we're not. But I think this is officially the time where every single week we've put all this pressure on the Bengals to go out and win. They haven't won. Therefore, they have nothing to lose at this point. You are playing against one of the better teams in the NFL. I don't really think that the Bengals care. I doubt they even look at the fact that they're technically favorites. They are underdogs in this game. We know it as Bengals fans. We know it as people in this city. They need to beat the Steelers. They've struggled mightily in the division under Zach Taylor, even at home. So there's a lot going into this game outside of the fact that, yes, we're going to come on the show Monday if they win and say the Bengals are back and might make the postseason.
Okay, now, Luke, before we go any further, people immediately on the chat, because you're in your room today. I mean, people are asking all kinds of questions about what's behind you. We can clearly see the Jamar Chase jersey, but people are asking about this, about Brutus Buckeye being in the shot, and you being such a hardcore Indiana guy now after you grew up an Ohio State fan.
Yep.
And about Hollis, who is Hollis. And we're also getting asked about the box of cereal. Why is there a box of cereal? Big Booey? Big Booey?
Let's just say there is a groundbreaking move. Okay, I'll get the cereal out of the way first. I don't know. I was kind of a hype beast where I was into those trends and stuff. There's actually Travis Scott. The rapper is on that box of Reese's Puffs, so I figured I would collect it because it might be worth something one day. The box is all ripped up now and has a bunch of golf balls in it, so I guess it's just storage. As for Brutus Buckeye, I'm officially declaring my Ohio State fanship is over. I'll leave it on the show today as a punishment. I was born an Ohio State fan through my dad that has no real tie whatsoever to Ohio State, and I fell into the trap, guys. Ohio State fans, you are great people. You are even better fans, but I was sucked into the nonsense too. I'm not a Buckeye fan anymore. I'm not a Buckeye hater, but I'm putting all my marbles into Indiana. It's just that's my place. I'm done with OSU. And I think this is coming from them beating the brakes off of my football team on Saturday. But we'll leave Brutus Buckeye up there because they reigned supreme over the Hoosiers on Saturday.
Okay, and what about Hollis? People don't know about Hollis.
Oh, the caddy bib. I caddied in an LPGA Tour event in Cincinnati. I think that was like 2022, maybe 21. And I kept the bib. I wasn't supposed to, but I figured you're really only going to caddy on the LPGA Tour once or twice. So it was a great opportunity, even better weekend, and Jillian Hollis was the golfer that I was able to be on the bag for. She made the cut. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lady from Cleveland, Ohio, played collegiately at the University of Georgia, and we root for her all the time. We loved her mom and dad. All right, Casey, your thoughts on the Bengalis before we get to college football. And Everett Henry says Tom just texted Luke and told Luke to cook his own turkey because he's no longer a Buckeye fan. That's probably fair, Everett. You and I agree on something for once. God bless you. All right, Casey, what about it?
Yeah, I mean that's the Bengals game. It is what it is. I think they just need to play, and they need to play with heart. They need to show that their season's not done. Right. I don't have much to say about the Bengals because I think we all know here, especially in this chat, that who this team is and what needs to happen for them to win. Defense needs to just kind of step up and make a play or two, and Joe Burrow's got to do the rest. On the other side, the Steelers, they've been kind of trending downwards ever since Russell Wilson's first game. Russell hasn't been playing bad, but the team itself has not been very efficient. Despite outgaining the Browns, out-converting the Browns, and out-physicaling the Browns in many aspects of that game, having more time in possession, they still found a way to lose. They're missing field goals. They're not converting on fourth downs and big downs when they need to. And overall, just keep finding ways to lose to bad teams. So if they can do it and the Bengals also find ways to lose, maybe this is just going to be a who wants to win situation come Sunday.
Yeah, door is open for the after the door closing a week ago. The door is now open once again for the Ravens. They take on the Chargers. We know all about the Chargers. Good team, having a good year, good coach. And that game will be on Monday Night Football tonight. Quick peek ahead before we get to the college games. It's always a big deal. I really wish the Bengals would get a chance to play on Thanksgiving one of these years because, look, whether the Bengals win games or lose games, one thing that cannot be denied, when they are on national television, the big game, every game's on national television, but when they're the spotlight game, I don't know who plays more exciting games than the Bengals play because they can score a lot of points and they give up a lot of points. I just don't understand why. I know that the Lions have been a team and they're there for a long time. There's a tie-in there with the Ford family ownership group, with the NFL and how supportive they've been of the league for a long, long time. So they've kept them there. That's been a tradition. The Cowboys generally are a team you want to see on Thanksgiving. And then there's sort of a third game now with the night game on Thanksgiving. I just can't understand why the Bengals can't play on Thanksgiving some year. I don't get it. I'd put them on. All right.
That'd be a perfect way to ruin a great holiday. Just a tremendous way to just make me not talk to any family, just sit in my
you don't talk to anybody anyway.
Watching the game on my phone, freaking out as they give up like three play 81 yards, 27 seconds, boom, boom, boom. It's just in my nightmares still. I mean, Justin Herbert, we made that guy look like what everyone thought he was going to be in the NFL. That was awful.
Sorry. Well, you're not talking to anybody at Thanksgiving anyway. So, I mean, what's the difference?
What?
All right. Let's get to college football. Well, let's start, Luke. Hey, look, I know that your school did not win, and they ran into a better team. I mean, Ohio State is one of the top 3 teams in the country. It doesn't mean they're going to win the national championship. It doesn't mean they're going to play for the national championship. But they are a juggernaut team. There is no question about it. They have their weaknesses. Everybody does. Oregon has weaknesses. Notre Dame has weaknesses. Georgia clearly has weaknesses. They've lost 2 games. But let's start with just the whole experience. I mean, you got to be down there on the field before kickoff, the whole vibe of Ohio State. They had game day there. They had big noon Saturday there. What was it like?
It was the big leagues. I mean, Ohio State does everything right. It's that much bigger at Ohio State. I know that Big Ten schools are all very similar in the way they do things and the student body and the culture surrounding sports, with it just being so hardcore and passionate. But OSU is a different level. I mean, it takes miles of walking to even get to a point close to the stadium. It feels like a pro game, but then you look back on it, you're like, this is way bigger than a pro game because it has that pro game element of like I'm not going to say the older crowd, but obviously not like the student crowd dominating it. And then here come the students. I mean, that student section might hold 35,000 students on its own and just shakes on every third down. I was hearing on Twitter that was probably the loudest Ohio State game of the season. Definitely, they said it's the loudest it's been in a long time. And that got to Indiana. I didn't think Indiana came out, if you didn't watch the game, and completely punched Ohio State in the mouth. They deferred the first kick. They get a fourth down stop on the goal line. They punch the ball in. They go up 7-0. They get a red zone interception. I mean, Indiana this was one of those starts where you're like, bend but don't break, bend but don't break. And that's exactly what they were doing. They were getting off the field. They scored in like a 10-play drive off rip. And it fell apart from there. I think it all started on the offensive line. But to Ohio State's credit, that's an NFL defense. It really is. They're that talented. They're that good. They're that big. And Indiana was outmanned. With that being said, Indiana didn't get beat 38-15 like a traditional beatdown. There was a punt taken back that there was, speculation. I'm not going to make any, referee issues with a block in the back call, but a punt getting taken back is obviously a rare thing. A punter straight up dropping a punt or a snap that hit him in the chest to the 4-yard line. So that's directly 14 points off the special teams game. So from an Indiana perspective, you got to clean up the offense. The offense was unacceptable, but you take away 14 points there, and you can't win if you can't score. So it didn't matter in the grand scheme of win or lose, but I think Indiana's going to be able to play with maybe a first-round matchup team, and so many people are calling them frauds and whatnot. Yes, they didn't show up, but with 110,000 on a rainy Saturday in Columbus is a tough place to play your best football.
Well, unfortunately for them, it's starting to look like that if they get in, they're going to have to play in that kind of environment in the first round again. That's the thing that worries me about Indiana. If they got that game at home, and they still might get it at home.
They might.
And they might. I would tend to say unlikely at this point. Because let's face it, I mean they're hanging on just to get in because of their strength or lack thereof of schedule. They haven't beaten a top 25 team. They play Ohio State and they get mauled. And the quarterback, doesn't even throw for 100 yards, gets sacked. And look, I wanted to see Indiana play well because I think that there's way too much love given to these SEC teams. I'll give the SEC teams a little bit of rope for 2 losses, because of the schedule that they play week in and week out. But I'm not giving any of these team rope on 3 losses. Georgia would be the lone exception because they play the number 1 schedule in the country. Georgia's going to play in the SEC championship game. And don't sleep on them against Georgia Tech, by the way, this weekend. I made the comment early in the year. Georgia Tech is a legitimate top 17 or 18 team in the country when they had their regular starting quarterback, Haynes King, playing. He missed a number of games. They lost a number of games. He's come back, and they've been winning. This guy's a good player, and they've got a good team and building a good program. But Georgia, if they lose the SEC championship game and get to 3 losses, I'll give them a little rope. I'm not giving Alabama. They lost to Vanderbilt. And you can say Vanderbilt's better this year. It's still Vanderbilt, okay? They lost to Vanderbilt. And they got blasted on the road by a 500 Oklahoma team, okay? Ole Miss. Yeah, they dismantled Georgia. Okay, fine. But they lost to Kentucky, who has 3 wins. And now they lose against Florida. Florida might be coming on strong, but it's still Florida. They're barely a 500 team. And they haven't beaten anybody in years worth of hoot. Okay, Texas A&M goes to Auburn. There's no way they're getting roped from me on this one. Now, they still have a chance to control their own destiny and get in the college football playoff. If they win this weekend over Texas, and that's a tall order, then you have to play the SEC championship game against Georgia. That's a tall order. If they beat those 2 teams in back-to-back weeks and they have 2 losses on the year, 3 losses, they're definitely going to get in because they'd be the SEC champion. Casey, what are your thoughts about all this? We'll get to UC here, by the way, in a minute.
Yeah, just a quick recap of what I thought about Ohio State, Indiana. I thought it was a classic Ohio State type of game where they start kind of slow and then they just end up pulling away and dominating the rest of the game. I never thought that Indiana was going to win. There for a moment, though, I thought it was actually going to be a game. But Ohio State's one of the best, if not the best, team in college football on a neutral field. I think the SEC teams, I've just been looking at them, they're very strange to me. I personally do not want to see a 3-loss team in the college football playoff, period. And we probably will see one, if I had to guess. And it's probably going to be Alabama if I had to put my money on it. That's going to be kind of interesting when that all gets set in stone. When did they come out with the official rankings?
So what they'll do is well, no, they'll come out with the rankings this Tuesday, but the official final deal is after all of the. It's a week from this Sunday, is when all of the teams will be announced that make it to the college football playoffs. So you have the last game of the regular season this coming weekend, then you play the conference championship games next weekend, and it's announced on Sunday morning.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then the other thing too is that I remember talking about Clemson maybe sneaking in.
Yep.
Yeah, that looks like that might be holding up true. I'd love to see what happens with the SMU Miami championship game coming up. And I don't know, guys. I think Texas has a real chance of losing against Texas A&M, regardless of what A&M's record is now, and then losing to Georgia in the championship round, and they might just fall out of it completely too. Lots of stuff to look forward to in the college football playoff world for sure.
Luke, what are your thoughts about all of this madness? We haven't even gotten to UC yet, which we will, and the whole chaos of the Big 12. I mean, again, this was like one of those articles a couple of weeks ago in the SEC where I was reading The Athletic and trying to figure out who was going to play in this Big 12 championship game. There are so many scenarios, it's insane. But basically, if Arizona State wins this weekend over Arizona, Arizona State is for sure in. If Iowa State wins this weekend, Iowa State is for sure going to play Arizona State in the championship game. But that's a tough game for Iowa State playing Kansas State. So, Colorado, outside distant chance. BYU, still a chance. What are your thoughts about everything that happened over the weekend? You think Indiana's still going to get in?
Indiana's 100% locked in, signed, sealed, delivered. I said that last week. It's the case. This is how the playoff was supposed to work. If you play in a power conference and you play in the championship game, you have a really good chance of getting in. Obviously, the winners get in. And if you're a one-loss team in a P4 or especially a P2 conference, I get their schedule wasn't good. I get they don't have the ranked win. But there's no way you're sitting out a one-loss Indiana team for the teams on the bubble right now. There are 3 lost teams on the bubble. We didn't even talk about Clemson 3 weeks ago, and they don't even have like a signature win in that period. They would get a big one over the weekend if they win on Saturday because they play South Carolina, who's red hot. And the winner of that game, they both have a chance to like slip in. The way this playoff was supposed to work was to not leave teams out that have a case to be in. There was too many teams that had too good of cases from all over the place, whether it's P4, the outside looking in, an undefeated UCF team, or whatever, a TCU Cinderella story out of the Big 12, to leave teams like that out of the 14 playoff. The 12 team, the best part about it is if you don't get in, it's your fault. Ole Miss, go on the road and beat a 500 Billy Napier Florida Gators team if you really want to be talked about in the playoff. How about Tennessee? Don't lose to Arkansas at home. Or I think that game was actually on the road. But don't lose to an Arkansas team that has like 3 wins on the season. Stuff like that is what should bounce you from the playoffs. And the best part about it is Tennessee's going to get into the playoff if they win next week. So you can still have a bad loss and have quality wins and get in. I think that's fair. And like Indiana, you can still not necessarily have a great schedule or resume, but if you dominate the teams you do in a Power 2 conference and you have, one ugly loss against a top 2 team on a rainy day on the road, that shouldn't leave you out of the playoff either. I actually think that the way things went with Alabama losing on Saturday, Ole Miss losing on Saturday, and there's still plenty of more upsets to come next week that nobody's talking about, I could see a team like Indiana getting kind of lucked into hosting a game just because a lot of teams are playing their way out of not only their conference championship games, but the college football playoff right now.
Yeah, I mean, the ACC thing, and Casey, you brought it up, and Luke, you followed it up. The ACC thing is one where 2 weeks ago they were going to get one team in. When the new rankings come out, SMU's going to vault into the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
They've been sitting at 13th unfairly. I think they've been treated most unfairly of any of the teams that we're talking about during this whole season. Their only loss was against BYU by less than a field goal, and that's when BYU was rolling and undefeated. And they were playing a different quarterback then. They changed quarterbacks right before the TCU game, and they have not lost since. They're undefeated in the ACC. Now, granted, they didn't play Miami, and granted, they didn't play Clemson. It was one of their years in their first year in the conference where they caught a break scheduling wise. But Miami has to win at Syracuse this coming Saturday to get into the ACC championship game. Kyle McCord just threw for 415 yards over the weekend. Syracuse is one of the highest scoring teams in the country. And we know that Miami can score a ton, but Miami gives up a ton. And they've won almost a handful of games this year by less than 4 points. That is not an easy game. If Miami wins that game, they play SMU and probably get 2 teams in the college football playoffs. But if Miami were to lose that game, then Clemson goes in with 2 losses on the year. The first game of the year against Georgia, they were tied at halftime, then just got hammered in the second half. They lost 34-3, I think the final was. But then they had one of those bad losses, man, 2 weeks ago against Louisville. Louisville's good. They're not supposed to beat Clemson at Clemson. So you're right, Luke. There's a lot of moving parts here about what's going to happen. You know, it makes you wonder, do any of the teams in the Big 12 deserve to be in there? I mean, seriously. The team that's playing the best of all the teams in the Big 12 right now is a team that has to win this weekend to become bowl eligible, and that's Kansas, because they started so poorly. They're the team nobody wants to play right now. So, I mean, Arizona State in the college football playoff?
It's cool. That's what this is for. I like it. I mean, they have an absolute lunatic of a head coach, and Kenny Dillingham is about to sneak into the college football playoff, or at least they control their own destiny. I think it rewards the new conference expansion and kind of makes it make sense, where there's all these new teams in the Big 12. Yeah, there wasn't necessarily power. I think Kansas was maybe picked to win the league or finish in the top 3, and they've proven that they have the talent to get some big wins the last 3 weeks, all with top 25 wins. But the way the season is working out, it just keeps getting easier for this committee. I know there's scenarios where teams can still sneak in, but as of right now, I mean, the top 6 are auto locked to get in. I would cut that off at Georgia as the last team. And then you're looking at Notre Dame, no doubt going to get in, deserving to get in, not playing in a conference.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you brought up a really good point. Both teams who make the ACC championship, in my opinion, should get in. I think that there's a caveat to South Carolina sneaking into this college football playoff, because they would be stacking together really good wins if they can beat Clemson on Saturday. And like, still, the idea of Tulane having a 25% chance, where if they get a win this week and then play Army in the American championship game and win, you're a conference champ, you're 1 loss, and you've picked up back-to-back or a ranked win against Army. You now have that case against if BYU's able to slip up. So there's so many different things that you can't even calculate or talk about. So it's more about the really good teams and less about like who's going to get in at this point. It's who is going to get in and make a run at a national championship. Because I think if Alabama were to sneak into the playoff, nobody wants to see Jalen Milroe. Nobody wants to see that. I know they haven't looked good, but I would rather see Alabama than an Arizona State that sneaks into the playoff. That's just me. Or I'd rather see an Arizona State than an Alabama. So it's all going to work itself out is the best part. But in hindsight, I think a lot of these coaches are maybe scratching their heads saying, we already play in strong enough conferences. Their non-con games should be simple games, cakewalks, don't give us any trouble to look back on and handle business. 1 loss inside the conference, you're still going to get in.
Well, the thing you still have is you have the ACC and the SEC. Unlike the Big Ten and all the others, they don't go to 9 conference games. So subjecting yourself, especially in the SEC, to a 9th conference game, I mean, well, it's probably pretty good for those teams depending on who they're scheduling. outside of the conference. Because subjecting yourself to a ninth game inside the SEC, you're subjecting yourself to the chance of yet another loss. ACC, not as much. I got to tell you, the team that looks the best of all of the teams right now, and I would agree with you that they would be a 90+% chance team to make the playoff, is Notre Dame. But I got to tell you, what would happen if Notre Dame lost to USC this year, this coming week? And let's think about that for a second. By far their best. And look, they demolished Army and Navy, but it's Army and Navy. Okay, they're nice stories, but they're not recruiting football players there. There's no NIL stuff there. I give them all the credit in the world, and I'm the number one fan of the military and all the people who serve in the military. But it's Army and Navy. Okay. Their only big win was the first game of the year against Texas A&M. And as you look back on that game right now, how big a win is that? I mean, how big a win is that? And they lost by far. They have by far the worst loss of any of the teams. You know, Indiana lost to Ohio State. Penn State lost to Ohio State. Ohio State lost to Oregon, right? And now you can start going down some of these other teams, and you mentioned some of the bad losses Ole Miss has had, but those are legitimate. I mean, those are SEC teams. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, who is barely bowl eligible. They're not even on the radar for the Mid-American Conference Championship, which, by the way, Ohio University and Miami are tied for first going into the last game of the year. But, you know, what do you think about that? I mean, am I crazy for even bringing that up?
No, totally fair. Notre Dame, based on the numbers, ESPN has this great playoff predictor where you can put in situations like that, and I just did, that they lost to USC, still have a 66% chance to make the playoff. So they would be one of those teams, the last team in, where you definitely wouldn't host a game. But that's what's fair about this. But at the same time, the way you put it out for certain teams like Notre Dame, like Indiana, where you can really get away with not beating a top 45 team in the country and find yourself maybe even hosting a game in Bloomington for the sake of Indiana. Notre Dame will absolutely host a game if they take care of business against USC. But I still am extremely high on Notre Dame. I think they're that good of a team. Yeah. I think that they can physically play with all these Power 4 schools. I think they can win those games in the trenches. We know that they can recruit Notre Dame. We know they have some studs. We'll see if Marcus Freeman can get that, signature win that he's really looking for, and that could come in the first round of the college football playoff, which would be obviously amazing for Notre Dame fans and the rest of that program.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing great, man. I mean, and you can say, well, who are they playing? That's fine. But, I mean, Notre Dame is playing great football right now. It would be interesting to see, because let's be honest about it. I mean, when they go up against the quote-unquote big boys, they've been kicked around pretty bad in recent years. I mean, when they play the Ohio States and the LSUs and the whoever else you want to pick out there that they've had to play in some bowl games, they've been banged around. But this is a good-looking team. Before we wrap up the show, I do want to get to two other topics. I want to get to number one, UC. Now, look, it's UC, okay? Everybody and his brother was a fan during the Fickle days. It's hard to believe we are 3 or 4 years removed from 3 years removed from a Cincinnati Bearcats playing in the college football playoff when there were 4 teams. I mean, to think, we talk about how far the Bengals have fallen. Look how far UC is falling. They have to win this weekend. If Kansas is the hottest team in the Big 12 and Arizona State would be the next, right there with those two teams is a team they're playing at Nippert this weekend, and that's TCU. I mean, they look like their season was spiraling out of control. And now all of a sudden they have righted the ship, and, man, they got a quarterback that is just having a monster year, stupid year. UC has to win this game just to go to a bowl game. It's year 2 of the Scott Satterfield experiment. Does he need to have this game to stick around? Casey, I'll start with you. What do you think?
Well, Tom, I will mention this too. UC was 5-2. They are now 5-6. They've
Yes.
lost 4 straight, and each loss looks worse than the next one. This team is just slowly kind of spiraled out of control, and for them to have this game be the final deciding factor, whether or not they actually are bowl eligible or not, is just a shame because they had it all right there in front of them. All they had to do was win one more game.
Yeah.
That was it. That was it. And they weren't able to, up to this point, weren't able to. I don't know if you're done with Satterfield completely. I just feel like his seat will be very hot. If there's a coach out there that you really believe in, then maybe you just take the chance and you dive and you go for that coach. You let Satterfield walk. But at the same time, this is year 2 for him. He has improved. He has actually won a couple conference games, so that's a big improvement from 0 the year before. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. Personally, my gut tells me you should probably fire him, but I don't know who you replace him with. I don't know if there's a good candidate out there that makes a lot of sense for UC at the moment. So I think it's very important this game, whether or not Satterfield's seat will be on fire or if it's just going to be cool for the rest of the season or the rest of the year.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's going to be a little chilly. It's not going to be brutal over the weekend. But TCU can score. And I don't know if UC on defense can stop TCU from scoring. TCU's defense is not all that great. They've been better lately, and they have good players. But I tell you, I just still can't believe, if you really look at the fate, and the Luke Fickell fate is still TBD. He walked into a program that when Barry Alvarez was there at Wisconsin, they played and won 3 Rose Bowls. Barry Alvarez is one of, I think, 3 coaches that's ever won 3 Rose Bowls, and that's when the Rose Bowl meant something. It meant you were the Big Ten regular season champion. It meant you played the best team from the Pac-12, and that was playing Washington, USC, those kinds of teams every single year. Oregon was winning 2 games a year in those years. But I mean, the Fickell thing, it's not going well at Wisconsin. They got just hammered by Nebraska over the weekend. And to think that he had taken this school here in Cincinnati to a college football playoff when it was 4 teams is hard to believe. I mean, what an incredible job
it is.
All right, last thing I want to ask you guys about before we get out of here, and I know the guys on Off the Bench will be talking about this a lot today too. Jonathan India finally traded. Ironically enough, traded for a guy he played with at the University of Florida. They went to a College World Series together. I got to tell you, I think it's a good move. I think it's a really good move because clearly they've seen enough from India or from McLean in the Arizona Fall League that they believe he's going to be back to play second base again. So, I think this was a right move. The guy gave you all he had. But if McLean's healthy, I don't think you miss him. Luke, what do you think?
I think it's the right move. Seeing as a really talented pitcher has proven that he has great stuff. But I think it's one of those things where, as a Reds fan, with how bad it's been, it does kind of sting a little to trade away, one of the grinders last year, one of the guys who told it how it was to the media, even when he was struggling. There was just the season was flooded with disappointment. For when you really look back on Jonathan India's time, he was the Rookie of the Year, brought some notoriety to Cincinnati. Obviously was beat up on and off the field, but he was one guy that you could really call out and call on, and he would take accountability for the Reds being as poor as they have been as a ball club. And to trade him away for an older pitcher, I know the fan base is thrilled because I'm all over Reds Twitter. I'm definitely not involved in it. Guys, this is a 3rd or 4th starter here. This is not going and getting an ace. This is not going and getting an all-star. I mean, I hope he turns into an all-star and he has the stuff to do it, but you traded away a 245, 250 hitter. That's what you're going to get. And I know there's a lot to be excited about. I thought it was like a good trade on the end of Cincinnati. May have won the trade. You never know. For all we know, the way the Reds go, Jonathan India is going to go turn into Bobby Witt's sidekick and hit 25, 30 bombs next year. But
No chance.
we'll put that behind us. I don't really think that you were going to get much more out of Jonathan India. I thought he grinded to hit 250 last year, whatever the number ended up being down the stretch. But this was a trade coming. I think it could have came sooner. But the Reds didn't panic at the trade deadline. They didn't shoot him out there. Maybe they could have got more value at that point for a team who really needed somebody who could hit at second base or the infield. But nonetheless, he's out of town. Enough Jonathan India trade talk. I just think that Reds fans are really excited over a move that was kind of like, maybe this will jumpstart the offseason. And we'll see where the Reds go from here, because that's certainly not some blockbuster trade.
Well, I got to tell you, I disagree totally. I think this is a phenomenal trade made by the Reds. You're talking about a guy who's 28 years old. The Reds have a bunch of guys in their early to mid-20s that are in that starting rotation that you can never count on staying healthy. Hunter Green has never pitched a full year healthy. We know about Lodolo. You can't get Lodolo out there for 2 months, much less an entire season. Okay? Andrew Abbott, hurt last year. Ashcraft, hurt last year. Every single one of these guys, hurt. Singer last year gives you a 3.7 ERA. Now, he made 32 starts. Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and Andrew Abbott and Graham Ashcraft, they can't count to 32 starts. And, I mean, bad luck is bad luck. But this guy pitched 180 innings for his team last year. He's 28 years old. I think this is a phenomenal move by the Reds. And I am stunned. And it comes down to money. I mean, neither one of these teams want to pay the guy. And I mean, this guy was in the same draft class as India, 2018. It's taken him a little while to find his footing. Okay. But now all of a sudden, you know, the year before he pitched 160 innings. Now he goes up to 180 innings. We're seeing the kind of progress out of this guy that the Reds were wishing they would see out of their starters, where they actually pitched more innings the year after than they did the year before.
You know, Tom, this is also one of those moves that involved risk, but it was like a calculated risk, right? They improved a area that was already a strength of theirs, but they made a move where, you know, they see what they see out of Matt McClain during this fall, during this winter, and they say, yeah, that's the future there. Where does India go? I don't know. Well, we have question marks at our pitching rotation, and so they made a move to make a calculated risk, and I think it's a good risk, and I applaud the front office for doing so.
I'm with you all the way. Okay, fellas, anything you want to get off your chest here before we kick it off? We will not have a show on Thursday. Luke, anything you'd like to add that's on your mind?
Sure. The leaderboard of the picks, I think we could give a fair update on that coming off yet another week. We don't have to wait.
There he goes, Bragg, patting himself on the back.
Somebody went 6-1 and has eclipsed the 50-win mark through, what is that, 85 games that we have picked this year. Just a casual 3-4 week of the square bet of the group, Tom. And Casey, I don't know what you were doing last week. I went back and watched the show, and every single pick I had, you were like, I'm going to go opposite to gain some ground. I don't know how good that went, 2 out of 7. But nonetheless, I think I might just go run away and hide. I really might. I might go hide for the holidays, come back in the new year, because at this rate, I can't miss. But no, all serious, another good week. This week coming up is huge, though. Rivalry week. You have, obviously, Thanksgiving, the holiday, the football on the holiday. There's a Friday NFL game this week. The Raiders play the Chiefs in that one. And then straight into just those Saturday games, where I will say this. It's a little bit disappointing because, like, those marquee rivalry games aren't going to hit the same. I think Ohio State, Michigan always hits the same, but the Iron Bowl is not very good. Maybe we watch some new ones, though. I'll certainly be watching Arizona versus Arizona State for the first time ever in my life, because I think that Arizona's a talented enough team to give Arizona State a run for their money. Iowa State has a huge game in rivalry week, so plenty to watch. But I'm glad the Bengals are back, too, because this is win or go home. I mean, you might win and
Yeah.
still go for the Bengals.
Well, the thing is that, I mean, you talk about having a little mercy and a little grace. When I made the pick last week of the 49ers, I had no idea, and it wasn't announced until Saturday, that the quarterback wasn't playing and they were going with a backup quarterback. So I said to you yesterday before the game even started, I said, hey, you can't count that against me, right? He said, absolutely. It counts against you. So, Casey, around Thanksgiving, no mercy.
No mercy.
None.
Casey, anything on your mind before we get out of here?
No, just want to say, happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the holidays. If you're not gonna be with us the rest of the week, those that are in the chat, thank you for watching. We appreciate you. Those that are listening on the Believe Network, we appreciate you. And thank you. Thank you a lot.
Beautifully said, Casey. Beautifully, beautifully said. We thank each and every one of you for joining us either in the chat, downloading our show, watching us live a couple of times a week. Want to thank our families for all their support. Luke's mom, my wife Polly, his sister Ella, Lukey man, all our family. Those of us those that we're lucky to have still with us, and those that are not with us anymore. And I know Luke's grandma Nana is watching the show. She watches every show, so we're grateful for Nana and her sense of humor. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. We'll look forward to catching up with you a week from today. That'll be after the Bengals. We'll recap the entire Bengals game against the Steelers. So to all, happy Thanksgiving. God bless, and thanks for joining us on Dialed In.